What Mad Jack did when his entire commando unit was captured. May 1944. The island of Brac, off the Dalmatian coast of Yugoslavia, early morning. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Churchill, 37 years old, was leading 7 men up a hillside toward a German-held position. 7 men, out of 1,500 who had started the operation. Behind them, on the beach, the rest of the force sat and watched. 1,500 Yugoslav partisans who had decided the German gun emplacements were too strong, who had looked at the fortified positions and the machine gun nests and made a rational calculation that attacking was suicide. Churchill hadn't made that calculation. Churchill didn't make those kinds of calculations. He had his broadsword on his belt, his Colt revolver loaded, a sack of grenades, and his bagpipes slung over his shoulder. 7 men followed him because 7 men were willing to follow a man carrying a medieval sword up a hill toward machine guns. The other 1,493 stayed on the beach. They would never reach the top. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories about the men who went further than anyone thought possible and the price they paid for it. To understand how Jack Churchill ended up on a Dalmatian island with 7 men and a broadsword, you need to understand the campaign he'd been fighting for 3 years. After the longbow kill at Lepinette in 1940 and the Commando raid at Vogso in 1941, Churchill had become something close to legend in the British military, the man with the bow and the sword. The piper who played March of the Cameron Men from the bow of a landing craft while heading into German fire. In 1943, he'd led No. 2 Commando through Sicily and the Salerno landings. He'd captured 42 German soldiers with nothing but his sword and a corporal, recommended for the Victoria Cross, awarded the Distinguished Service Order instead, twice. By early 1944, he was in the Adriatic, based on the island of Vis off the Yugoslav coast. His mission was to support Josip Broz Tito's partisans, the Yugoslav resistance, in their fight against the German occupation. The partnership was uneasy. Tito's partisans were communists. Churchill was a British officer from a colonial family who had graduated from Sandhurst. The ideological gap was enormous. But they shared an enemy. And in war, that's enough. The target was Brac, a German-held island in the Adriatic. The garrison was entrenched, good defensive positions, machine gun nests covering the approaches, artillery support from the mainland. Taking Brac would require a significant force and a coordinated assault. Churchill organized a raiding force, 1,500 men, a mix of British commandos from 43 Commando, a troop from 40 Commando, and the bulk of the force drawn from Tito's partisans. It was the largest operation Churchill had ever commanded, the largest combined British-Yugoslav action in the Adriatic theater. The landing was unopposed. The boats hit the beach. The men poured ashore. No resistance. No gunfire. The Germans were further inland, dug in on the high ground, waiting. Then the partisans saw the gun emplacements, fortified positions, concrete, machine guns with overlapping fields of fire, mortar positions behind the ridge, the kind of defensive setup that chews up infantry attacking uphill, the kind that turns brave men into dead men in open ground. The partisan commanders held a conference. They looked at the positions. They looked at their men. They decided to wait. Delay the attack until the following day. Bring up more support. Find a better approach. The rational decision. The sensible decision. Churchill disagreed. He wanted to attack now. The element of surprise was fading. Every hour of delay gave the Germans time to reinforce, time to call for support from the mainland, time to prepare for exactly the kind of assault the partisans were planning for tomorrow. The partisans wouldn't budge. Their commanders outranked Churchill in the Yugoslav chain of command. This was their country, their war. They would attack on their schedule. Churchill played his bagpipes, not as a performance, as a signal, a call to any commando who could hear the pipes to form up and prepare for battle. The pipes cut through the morning air, echoing off the rocky hillside, drifting out over the water. Some of the British commandos responded, not all, not enough. And then came something nobody expected, a strafing run from an RAF Spitfire, friendly fire, a British plane attacking British positions. Confusion, chaos, men scrambling for cover from their own side. Churchill assessed the situation. The partisans weren't going to move. The air support was shooting at them. The element of surprise was gone. He made a decision: withdraw for the night. Try again in the morning. The next morning, dawn, the second attempt. 43 Commando launched a flanking attack on one side. Churchill personally led the elements from 40 Commando on the other. The partisans were supposed to advance from the landing beach, support the assault, provide the numbers needed to overwhelm the defenses. The partisans stayed at the beach, 1,500 men, standing on a beach, watching British commandos attack a fortified position without support. Churchill didn't stop. He'd been given an objective. He was going to take it or die trying. That was the kind of officer he was. The kind who saw the word retreat as a personal insult. He pushed forward, up the hillside, through scrub and rock, under fire. The German machine guns opened up as soon as the commandos broke cover, rounds snapping through the air, kicking up dust and stone fragments, men falling. The force shrank as they climbed. Casualties, men hit, men pinned down. Men who couldn't advance and couldn't retreat and just pressed themselves into the ground and prayed. Only Churchill and 6 others reached the objective. 7 men, on a hilltop, surrounded by German positions. No support coming, no reinforcements, no partisans. Churchill fired his revolver until it was empty, every round. The 6 commandos around him fired everything they had, rifles, grenades, sidearms, everything. Then a mortar round landed among them. The explosion killed or wounded all 6 commandos, every man except Churchill. In one instant, he went from leading 7 men to being completely alone. He was the last man standing. He looked at the German positions, looked at the bodies of his men around him, looked at his empty revolver, looked at his sword, looked at his bagpipes. He picked up the bagpipes. He stood on that hilltop, alone, surrounded by advancing German soldiers, and he began to play. "Will ye no come back again?" A Scottish song, a lament. The melody that Bonnie Prince Charlie's supporters sang after his defeat at Culloden in 1746. A song about loss, about the end of something, about the hope that what was gone might someday return. Churchill played it on the pipes while the Germans advanced, while bullets cracked past him, while mortar rounds exploded on the hillside. He stood and he played because there was nothing else to do, because he was Jack Churchill, and if this was the end, it would end with music. A grenade landed near him. The explosion knocked him unconscious. He fell. The Germans found him lying in the dirt, bagpipes beside him, sword on his belt, unconscious but alive. They didn't kill him. The reasons for this are debated. Some accounts say the Germans spared him because they saw the name Churchill on his identification and assumed he was related to Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, a valuable prisoner, worth more alive than dead. Others say the German soldiers who reached him simply couldn't bring themselves to kill a man who had been playing the bagpipes while they shot at him. That there was something about the sheer absurdity and bravery of the act that earned a grudging respect. Whatever the reason, they took him alive, bound his hands, carried him down the hillside, put him in a boat, sent him to the mainland. He was flown to Berlin, interrogated. They wanted to know if he was related to Winston. He wasn't. Different Churchill entirely. Different family, different lineage. But the name opened doors, or rather, closed them. The Germans treated him as a high-value prisoner, which meant he wasn't shot. They sent him to Sachsenhausen concentration camp, north of Berlin, one of the most notorious camps in the Nazi system. Churchill didn't stay long. In September 1944, he and a Royal Air Force officer found a weakness in the camp's perimeter, an abandoned drain running under the wire. They crawled through it at night, through mud and darkness, and the stench of a drain that hadn't been maintained in years. They made it out, free, on the other side of the wire. In the dark, in Germany, with no papers, no money, no food, and 125 miles of enemy territory between them and the nearest friendly position, Churchill started walking toward the Baltic coast. The plan, to the extent there was one, was to reach the sea and somehow find a boat. He walked for days, through German countryside, avoiding patrols, sleeping in ditches, eating whatever he could find, roots, berries, raw vegetables stolen from fields at night. He was recaptured, picked up by a German patrol near the coast, sent to a different camp, this one in Niederdorf in the Austrian Tyrol, a camp for high-value prisoners, dignitaries, diplomats, people the Germans wanted to keep alive for potential bargaining. Churchill escaped again. April 1945. The war was collapsing. The German army was disintegrating. Guards were disappearing. The camp was falling apart. He walked out, south this time, through the Alps, through terrain that would challenge a mountaineer with full equipment. Churchill had nothing. No gear, no food, no map. Just his legs and the same stubborn refusal to stay captured that had defined his entire war. He walked 150 miles, through the Tyrol, through mountain passes still deep in spring snow, alone, on foot. He reached American lines in Italy, walked up to a patrol, identified himself. The Americans stared at him, a filthy, starving British officer who claimed to have walked through the Alps from an Austrian prison camp. They believed him, because by 1945, the things that were happening in Europe were too strange for anyone to make up. Jack Churchill was free, for the second time in 8 months, having escaped 2 different prison camps in 2 different countries. The war in Europe ended shortly after. Churchill, characteristically, was disappointed. He immediately applied for transfer to the Pacific. He wanted to fight the Japanese. He was training for it when the atomic bombs dropped. Hiroshima, August 6th. Nagasaki, August 9th. Japan surrendered. The war was over. Churchill's reaction has been quoted and requoted for 80 years. If it wasn't for those damn Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years. He was joking. He was also completely serious. Because Jack Churchill was a man who had found the one thing in the world he was made for, and the world had just taken it away. The 6 commandos who died on that hilltop on Brock were buried with military honors. Their names are recorded in the Commonwealth War Graves Commission records. They followed a man with a broadsword and bagpipes up a hill toward machine guns, and they didn't come back. Churchill never spoke publicly about them, never wrote about them. The capture at Brock was the one chapter of his war that he didn't tell as an adventure story, because it wasn't. It was the chapter where his men died and he didn't. Years later, when asked about the moment on the hilltop, When he'd stood alone and played the pipes, he said only one thing. It seemed the proper thing to do. 5 words, no elaboration. The most Mad Jack answer to the most Mad Jack question. If you were on that hilltop, the last one standing, surrounded by enemies, out of ammunition, would you have played the pipes? Or would you have dropped them and run? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about the men who went further than anyone